Welcome, everybody. My name is Nerijus Poskus, and I'm a Vice President of Global Ocean Strategy at Flexport. Today's session is Rethinking Ocean Freight from the Ground Up. I have two panelists joining me today. First is Camille Egloff, Senior Partner BCG, Global Leader, Transportation and Logistics. Camille leads Boston Consulting Group's transportation and logistics sector globally. She has advised shipping and logistics clients across geographies on larger scale transformations, advanced analytics, and digital adoption topics. She is also a thought leader in shipping decarbonization and recently published a new article and research in net zero transformation strategies for shipping. Highly encourage all of you to read that. Second, we have Konstantina Georgaki, Director of Ocean Platform Partnerships at Flexport. Konstantina works with ocean carriers and our supply-side ecosystem on joint strategies and technology integrations that help provide more streamlined services to our customers. Before we begin, please read the legal slides. Everything we say here is basically for information purposes only, and we should not be held accountable. That's very important. So where are we now? Where we are now is on one side of the ocean, you have factories struggling to keep the lights on while also navigating very strict COVID restrictions, trying to fulfill record high demand on the other side of the ocean. At the same time, even if these factories succeed producing enough goods, they can't find containers. Shipping instructions are changing until the very last minute. Shipments often get rolled and they can't find, like I said, empty containers. And even if they do, in some cases, the factories are running full. So quite a chaos. On the other side of the ocean, you have no inventories or low inventories, or in some cases, you actually see panic over ordering because customers see record low reliability in ocean shipping, and some of them are actually over ordering. At the same time, importers are paying very high prices. They get record low reliability. There are hundreds of vessels that anchor globally, right? 12.5% of global capacity today is anchored, right? It's not moving. That further affects the schedule integrity, compounding to already big problems in reliability. On the ocean carriers have deployed all available vessels, varying in reliability, transit time, and emissions. All of this is happening, and industry morale seemingly is extremely low. So Camille, maybe a question goes to you. Why is this happening?
I think, this picture says 1,000 words, and actually it translates the fact that logistics all of a sudden, logistics was always important, but it was not the top topic on a CEO agenda. And I would say that in the last 18 months, what we've seen is that the pandemic has actually put logistics and supply chain very much at the top of the agenda of any CEO. So I think this picture is very telling because indeed, on the one hand, you have congestions, you have incredible imbalances in equipment. And on the other hand, this disruption creates a lot of stress in the supply chains. And I think the question that is really here to answer, Nerijus, is this here to stay, or are we going to see a fix for those issues and distress in the supply chains anytime soon? And here I think we need to look at the facts. So I don't have only good news because part of it is not going to be solved just immediately. But I think it's important to know that, yes, there is a silver lining on the horizon. And what is the silver lining? So first of all, I think this incredible surge in demand, and notably of durable goods that we all know are coming from Asia. I think when you look at consumer demand, we expect somehow a relapse of this. So we expect that this is not going to last anymore, and we're going to see and go back to normal consumption when it comes to those durable goods. I think the frenzy about all the garden equipment, all the toys for the kids that are at home, all the electronics equipment, because everyone had to equip themselves with home office or homeschooling, I think this is clearly going to be reduced. I think the other good news is that the port productivity is also going to go back to normal. At least, I believe that within the next 6 months we are going to see smoothing out of those port congestions. Of course, ports have been congested because they were also operating with lower manpower. The COVID rules of operation were also clearly high constraints on how ports are operating, and all the chaos around the equipment imbalance was also, adding on to that. Our projection is that the imbalance within the next 6 months are going to be smoothened out, and with this, the port productivity should also come back up to normal. We're never completely safe from new disruptions, of course. We saw the event of the Ever Given that create more disruptions, but I think if everything goes back to normal, what we expect is that within the next 6 months, this congestion should be okay. Now, what is likely to stay, I said I don't have only good news, but what is likely to stay is that what we've observed in the months during the pandemic is that you really have container liners which have learned a couple of things. They are operating very stressfully in an environment that clearly needs their service. They've been very careful at deploying their capacity. And I think that this smart deployment of capacity is something that is probably here to stay. There's also there's been some delays in the delivery of new vessels, and we're going to still see some delays in the new vessels, new capacity hitting the market. So that's potentially not being resolved immediately. And I think the last point is, as demand picked up very dramatically, of course, everyone is feeling the increase in rates, sometimes a 3x factor compared to pre-pandemic. So a surge in freight rates that we had not seen before. I think no one can expect that the freight rates will completely go down to before pandemic. There is likely to stay a certain premium that we expect to be in the range of 20 to 30%, depending on the trade lanes. And this based on the sheer demand supply kind of analysis, but also in terms of just the repercussion of the liners managing their capacity in a very efficient way.
I think this is spot on. Definitely resonates with me as a consumer with the kids at home, getting them toys, and as a logistics practitioner, seeing what the colleagues are going through. I would like to highlight maybe two more factors here. One is outside of prices and a general MQC, what we've had in this industry forever is low level of commitment. So even in a slack market, the teams have to deal with a lot of exceptions. The cargo is being rolled, or the cargo didn't make the cargo ready date, and operational teams feel it, and that really erodes trust between the people that come together. The other factor is that although global trade is really a relay of information and documents, still a lot of that is either offline or emails, in different formats and in different standards, and it's really hard to measure, and it's really hard to improve what you cannot measure. So for these two reasons combined, trust in the industry has been low, and low level of trust is a key barrier to innovation. So for everyone to come together and figure out new solutions for the downstream customers, and improve the health of the ecosystem.
Thank you, Camille, and thank you, Konstantina, for input. low levels of trust, low morale in the industry, high prices, low reliability. Sounds like we may be at the breaking point, but me being an optimist, I actually think we are at the tipping point. This what's happening is probably maybe too much, but it's good for a change, right? Everybody in the industry today wants a change. So what I would like to ask all of the panelists is, what are the most exciting you are working on and you see changing in the years to come? Because globally, thousands of people, if not hundreds of thousands, are working in the ocean freight world trying to change how things work. So Konstantina, let's start with yourself.
Yeah, I love the question because it allows us to kind of think the future in more proactive ways and more upbeat ways, because I know everyone, we feel it today, is struggling. So building on the theme of trust, you need three ingredients for trust. One is clarity, what the commitment is. Second, symmetry in the incentive to fulfill the commitment. And third, reliably enforcing. And through a repeated cycle of engaging in clear commitments, symmetrical incentives, reliably enforced, you start to have a virtuous circle of trust. And what I'm really excited about is to start seeing more of these conversations happen, where the customer can see more choice about how to move freight. For example, you can have a customer that has, let's say it's an apparel customer, has a shipments accounting for 1,000 TEUs, and half of it needs to be here for the spring collection, so they have time. They can be here by in the next 3 months, so they can afford a couple of rolls. And the other half is for opening new store. It has to be here no matter what in the next month or so. So in the first case, you can really structure an agreement where you say, as a customer, I'm allowing these many rolls and I'm willing to pay this amount of money, and I commit to my cargo ready dates. And similarly, this is what I expect from my provider. And for the other freight, where it's much more sensitive, rather than air freight, which tends to be the choice when something is urgent and needs to be here in a guaranteed fashion, you start to put those in the stipulations where you say, no cargo roll, I'm willing to pay this much, and if the provider cancels, I will exact this amount of premium. So in this way, you start to see different service levels being built that are clearly communicated, provide more choice, and also provide a reliable way of how to deal with freight. And of course, this is underpinned with technology. And when that works well, you won't even see the technological layer. So it should be as easy as a drop-down menu for the customers selecting the option they want. And also swiping a credit card or being automatically charged for when the contract is fulfilled or when the obligation needs to be handled in a different way. And I'm encouraged today because I see more of these conversations happening in the industry. Customers start asking, what if we dealt with freight in a different way than we do today? And I see providers and in the supply chain starting to ask each other, okay, is there something we can do differently here? And I like these questions because then we all start to think a little bit more creative for ourselves. Camille, what do you see?
First of all, I love the notion of trust, I'm also always wanting to bring a positive view, and I think trust cares and carries a lot of optimism. I think there's another notion and that brings a lot of optimism in the market, but also tremendous excitement. To your question, what I'm really excited about is really seeing this industry, but also more broadly, the whole logistic and the supply chains really racing to net zero. And this is a topic I'm super passionate about. We are researching on this with BCG and also publishing a number of articles. But I think if you ask me what's really going to be the next frontier, it's how we really address this race to net zero and how do we, as BCG, help our clients and help companies in the transportation and logistics, but also, all players in the ecosystem of supply chains really manage this race to net zero in a very good way. And here, I mean, you can see a very interesting survey that we conducted recently. Yeah? We actually try to measure what's the percentage of customers that are actually ready to pay what we would call a green premium. So how many of them are ready to pay a bit more for a transportation that would be carbon neutral? And what you see is that, it's quite encouraging. 71% of the customers that we interviewed said, you know what, if this is to go and to support the race to net zero, we're actually willing to pay a bit more. So that's quite encouraging. That's the good side of the story. The more challenging side of the story is that when you ask them, how much are you willing to pay? Long story short, those 71% are willing to pay, but basically a premium that would be 1 to 2% on top of what they are paying today. So when we look at the customers who are willing to pay only 2% more on top of the current freight rate, so the premium is fairly limited compared to the huge cost of actually going to a shipping that would be net zero emission by 2050. We looked at the full bill, and you're talking of 2.4 trillion that would be needed to inject in the shipping industry in order to reach a clean industry. So how do we get to that number? I mean, I don't want to go too much into technicalities and detail, but long story short, only 30% of the bill can actually be covered either by operational efficiency or technological efficiency. The rest is about engine, it's about the production of new fuels, and in particular, hydrogen, but also new fuel synthesis. So you understand that a big part of this actually sits in the entire ecosystem, far beyond what shipping companies have within the range of what they can control. And I think the pledge that we have is that this race to net zero cannot be won only by the shipping industry itself, but it has to be a collaboration across the ecosystem. And if you look at going back to the customers and going back to the trust, we looked at how do you translate this premium into the cost, the additional cost on the price paid by the consumer. And actually, if you take a car or if you take a garment, producing with clean technology and transporting with clean technology, the additional price is very limited. We estimate that it's 1 to 2% on top of a finished good on shelf of a supermarket. And therefore, I think there's a lot to be done with regards to the narrative that is being shared within the ecosystem of how the different stakeholders and participants are contributing to paying basically for this premium for green goods, the green premium and the green transportation. And I think it's very important that shipping companies bring people around them and a lot of conviction in those ecosystems so that there is, a joint dialogue. Now, the unlock will also be the regulatory framework, which, with IMO, with the European Union as well, becoming tougher and tougher, which I think in a way is very good, because then everyone is incentivized. But at the same time, the lack of carbon tax doesn't put everyone on the same foot. And therefore, I think it's very important that also the regulatory framework and all the authorities work in the same direction. So I think, what I'm passionate about is really how we can bring those ecosystems together and align the ecosystems towards a common goal, which is the only way to make this race to zero a successful one.
Thank you, Camille. I would like to actually build on that. Like you cannot get new and ecologically friendly fleet overnight, right? It's going to take years to build those vessels, right? Some carriers have already started with LNG, others are investigating other methods. But that actually brings the last point that I am really excited about is differentiated services and how can you as a consumer support those. And one way you can support those is, let's say the carriers are launching differentiated services for years, right? Some of those are fast boats where you simply are cutting transit time because it's the vessels are running at higher speeds. Other cases, you have vessel loops that are fully deployed by more ecologically friendly vessels. So if you support those, you are actually supporting the environment more. So that brings, like I said, the last section, service differentiation. The picture that you see here is before, like I wanted to describe what those differentiated services are. Remember I said fast boats. Those fast boats are not just running fast. In some cases, they are able to go around the port congestion. And in some cases, they even have dedicated port terminals. Let's say Matson has that in Long Beach. CMA has that as well, and Zim, and there are other carriers. So on the land side, you also have premium differentiated services on rail. Some shipping lines have signed domestic rail contracts that allow you to improve transit time simply because they use those domestic mail trains. Now, at origin, you actually can select lower cost services that are maybe subject to longer transit times, or in some cases are, let's say, even subject to roll. So you don't really have a delivery by date, rather you have a long delivery window. But for some SKUs or products, it actually works very well. In other cases, you actually have premium services that allow you to get access to equipment when there is lack of equipment. And the way this works is similar to, say, Uber price surge, right? When there's not a lot of drivers, price goes up, more drivers come to the area. Exactly how it works in ocean shipping. If there is no equipment in Shanghai, you do pay the premium, and carriers all of a sudden will send more equipment to that area and you will get access to it. Why am I so excited about those differentiated services? One, it gives customers more options. So you can start thinking about differentiating by product. Two is it gives you ability to get, let's say, better prices because you have options, right? Some services are faster, some services are slower. Three is you can support more economically friendly services that are, let's say, like I said, more economically friendly. And third, you actually can, in some cases, shift from air freight to fast ocean freight, right? Because the vessels, so the very premium vessels are so reliable, and maybe in today's market, they still see some delays, but let's think the future, right? When things get back to normal, they are very reliable. You get transit times that are competing with air freight. And that really moves the needle when it comes to saving money because air freight is so expensive, but also even more so saving CO2 because air freight is polluting significantly more. So what I think is going to happen next, and what I'm actively working on, is those differentiated services. We're going to see more of them. We will see more niche carriers calling more niche terminals in the United States, potentially also Europe. It's a bit harder to achieve because ports are typically larger in the vessel strings, and the vessels themselves are larger. But nevertheless, the trend will continue. What is most important is what Konstantina said, trust. If there is no trust for premium services because all parties are not held accountable, the success of those premium services will be little. So we really need to focus that all parties are being held accountable through data. Then those services, in my opinion, will succeed. I think to wrap this up, we discussed a lot of interesting topics, right? Trust needs to be rebuilt. Services are going to be more and more differentiated and race to zero. But while all of this is changing and a lot of people are working on different things. I would like each of us to give some sort of advice to customers. How can they be best positioned to take advantage of the changes that are happening in the market, right? They're not going to just sit and wait. So Camille, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Nerijus. Look, I think in terms of advice to customers, there is clearly a way to be very effective in this whole transition strategy. I don't think that I'm having any single conversation today, be it with shippers or with transportation companies, where this race to net zero is not at the heart of the conversation, because simply all the solutions are not there. And even when there is comfort about the technology that might prevail, some of them are very comfortable about this. There is still, a lot of uncertainty about how you manage the entire supply of fuels, for example. So a lot of uncertainty around that, and therefore I think we have our proven approach to address this transition strategy. I would just like to call out three things here. I think number one, it's super important to continue shaping the customer demand and shape the narrative of why everyone can agree on the long-term vision and that net zero is a no-brainer. We need to act and act now, but it's very limited, the understanding of what's the premium, what's the cost to get there. And I think we just need to talk about it, not shy away of addressing this topic where we will need to share that cost. And for this, shaping the narrative around customer demand is extremely important. I think the second one I would like to call out is when you look at climate-proof operations, essentially the availability of future fuels, because there are different technologies that potentially will win, but one technology or a single technology can only win if there is a chain, an ecosystem of providers, infrastructure, and then users that work together. So here is really a pledge to coordinate that ecosystem and to make sure that this collaboration starts early on. Is the only way that it will work. Yesterday evening, I was sitting at the table with a ship owner, very large one, well-known globally, that was saying, I'm not worried about technology. I'm much more worried about the supply of fuels. And we need to make sure that we have really the energy companies ready to put also the money into the infrastructure. And the third thing I would say is, it's all about engaging with stakeholder management. Before I talked about the regulatory framework, I'm very passionate about this collaboration between private and public. There can't be regulators on the one side of the table, activists and private companies on the other side. It's all about working together, because I think companies are ready to, they understand and they have the same goal. So it's more about aligning the way forward and aligning the incentives. So that would be for me the recommendation to customers.
Konstantina, let's go with you.
Yeah. So maybe from my side, I would like to first acknowledge that these are really tough times for everybody and for the customers. And everybody's mind space right now is occupied by just getting a box. Is a really hard time right now. But sometimes we let the urgent kind of like trump the important. And as they say, the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. And we see some of the larger customers that have more of the bandwidth kind of like doubling in all of these areas. And I would love for kind of our smaller customers to just start thinking ahead of what they can take advantage as well. So maybe a three-part advice. One, drive some experimentation. We see some different types of products popping up a little bit in the market. For example, we've seen lately some spot products. There's not a lot of them right now because the market is really tight, but they tend to come with tighter guarantees, if you will, albeit at a steeper price. But they give a good example of trying out a different type of freight instrument that over time and as the market softens up, that gives customers a little bit of practice and a release valve of how to deal with different types of freight instruments. So I would say drive some experimentation first. Second, in this urgent world, it's easy to forget about performance management, but I would urge the customers to reinstall the QBRs or even monthly BRs and demand of their providers to think a little more creatively. Also, upcoming tender season, ask them how else can we structure this. I think that's really important. And thirdly, the suppliers need to be brought on board. So really understand what is possible on the origin side. So in this way, driving some experimentation, being very diligent about performance management, involving the suppliers, you can start to see a little bit of the patterns that will happen more. What is possible from the supply chain that you experience, what is your own freight needs, and what is possible in the market. So I think that would be a good recipe to set yourself up for success. What do you see, Nerijus?
Yeah, I think my biggest advice would be the change you want to see, right? If there's demand, supply will follow. It may take time. So, for example, how can you be the change you want to see, right? There are differentiated services are out there. So if you think about next year's tender season, when you launch one, start pricing by different products or different SKUs and ask for different price levels: fast, slow, regular. Number two, no matter how appealing it may be, don't go full into anything, full hedge, right? Like today, everybody would like to have more fixed contracts. Well, maybe next year, fixed contracts will be more expensive than the spot market. It's extremely difficult to see. So advice would be have a good mix of contracts, instant pricing when it becomes available, and your spot pricing. Third small advice would be make sure you compare apples to apples in your upcoming RFP season, right? Especially when it comes to premium services. They are wildly different. Two shipping lines from Shanghai to Los Angeles may both claim they have a very premium services, and transit times can differ in 10, 15 days or more. Again, the only way to do this is ask for KPIs and ask for accountability. Keep in mind that contracts are becoming more and more enforceable for all sides, right? The forwarders, the carriers, and the importers. So prepare for that. If you don't, it may get very expensive for you because those enforceable contracts have penalties. So if your forecasts, for example, are off, you may start seeing penalties that you won't be happy about. But if your forecasts are good, you're ahead of your competitors, you will start saving money, you will start seeing improved lead times. And lastly, don't wait for a perfect timing. It will never be perfect. Again, like I said at the very beginning, if there is demand, supply will follow. So if you work with Flexport today, bring it up in your next call to our customer service team and ask for differentiated services. That would be my advice for you. Now, I would really like to thank our guest speaker, Camille, for joining us in this session. And also to all of you listening in, I truly believe we can transform this industry and focus on value creation together. And shipping all of a sudden will become exciting and more people will join this industry. So thanks again and have a great day.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.